Lesson 11 for September 7 through 13, Living the Advent Hope, read by Dr. Percy Harold. Sunday, September 8. How long, O Lord? Throughout the Bible's story, there is a repeated call from God's people, particularly those experiencing slavery, exile, oppression, poverty, or other injustice or tragedy, for God to intervene. The slaves in Egypt, the Israelites in Babylon, and many others called out to God to see and hear their sufferings and to right these wrongs. And the Bible offers significant examples of God's actions to rescue and restore his people, at times even taking revenge on their oppressors and enemies. But these rescues were usually short-lived, and the various prophets continued to point forward to a final intervention, when God would put an end to evil and lift up the downtrodden. At the same time, these prophets continued the cry, "How long, O Lord?" For example, the angel of the Lord asked about the exile of the Israelites in Zechariah 1:12, "Lord Almighty, how long will you withhold mercy?" The Psalms are full of laments about the apparent prosperity and good fortune of the wicked, while the righteous are abused, exploited, and poor. The psalmist repeatedly calls on God to intervene, trusting that the world is not presently ordered in the way God created it or desires it, and taking up the cry of the prophets and oppressed, "How long, O Lord?" Let's look at Psalm 94, verses 3 through 7. "Lord, how long will the wicked triumph? They utter speech and speak insolent things. All the workers of iniquity boast in themselves. They break in pieces your people, O Lord, and afflict your heritage. They slay the widow and the stranger and murder the fatherless. Yet they say, 'The Lord does not see, nor does the God of Jacob understand.'" In a sense, injustice is more difficult to endure among those who believe in a just God who desires justice for all his people. The people of God will always have a sense of impatience about evil in the world, and God's seeming inaction is another source of impatience. Thus, the sometimes harsh questions of the prophets, "How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save?" Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2. A similar cry is taken up in the New Testament, where even creation itself is portrayed as groaning for God to rescue and recreate, as we read in Romans 8, verses 19 to 22. "For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labours with birth pangs together until now." In Revelation chapter 6, verse 10, this cry, "How long, O Lord?" is taken up on behalf of those who have been martyred for their faith in God. But it is the same cry, calling on God to intervene on behalf of his oppressed and persecuted people. So to finish the day, read Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. What is Jesus saying about God's response to the repeated cries and prayers of his people for him to act in their behalf? How is this linked to the need for faith? Luke 18, beginning at verse 1. "Then he spoke a parable to them, that men always ought to pray and not lose heart, saying, There was in a certain city a judge who did not fear God nor regard him. Now there was a widow in that city, and she came to him, saying, Get justice for me from my adversary. And he would not for a while. But afterward he said within himself, Though I do not fear God nor regard man, yet because this widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me. Then the Lord said, Hear what the unjust judge said. And shall God not avenge his own elect, who cry out day and night to him, though he bears long with them? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? You have been listening to a reading of the Adult Sabbath School Bible Study Guide by Dr. Percy Harold from Queensland, Australia. This service is brought to you by Hope Channel, the Sabbath School Department, and Christian Services for the Blind. Remember, God is always faithful.